Hello and a very warm welcome to all the viewers of Gyan Darshan IGNOU channel. I am Dr. Richna Agarwal, Associate Professor in the School of Vocational Education and Training, IGNOU. And today my topic of presentation is clinical trials. So I welcome all the viewers and the learners of PG DPSM program whom are currently pursuing their PG DPSM, and also the exams are going on. So they are also appearing for the exams. So let us see in today's session what all we are going to cover, first of all, which is on clinical trials. The objectives of today's session are that what is a clinical trial, what is the historical background of clinical trial, and what is the need of clinical trials. Today we are going to see some terms such as Nuremberg Code, what does it mean, what are investigational drugs, how we can define clinical trial, and how we can describe the different phases of clinical trials. Also, we are going to see how we can classify the various phases of clinical trials, and also we will be understanding the study design for clinical trials. So let us begin one by one. First of all, we will deal with the historical background of clinical trials. Now, the history, why there is a necessity for the clinical trials. This is very important to understand. In earlier days, the tests or the drugs which were brought into the use for people were not tested in a scientific manner. What used to happen is that either the chemist or the doctor used to test the drug on himself or herself, or they used to arbitrarily test it on the animals with a trial and error method. They had no proper laid down procedures which should be followed before a drug should come out in the market. When there was a need which was felt that even the chemists or the doctors were not having sufficient experience, or they were not coming out with any productive drug formulation, then they used to just grab some human beings, like the vulnerable groups, like the poor people, or you can say the prisoners, the slaves which were there in those days, or some ethnic groups like Jews, they were also grabbed. And they used to perform experiments on these human beings in a very unethical manner, because at times these chemical compounds which were to be declared as a drug, they used to have very bad reactions on the body. They used to have very bad effect on the system, organs, and a lot of side effects were these prisoners and these slaves and other vulnerable sections of the society, they used to undergo. So this was the beginning when it was felt that there was, then gradually the society started making hue and cry that why such people are being made to suffer. On what basis have you selected these people, even though they are prisoners, even though they are vulnerable people, they are poor, they are slaves, but that does not give you right to do unethical experiments on the human beings. So there was a need that there should be a proper ethical procedure laid down for developing clinical trials or for bringing out any drug into the market. Hence, we felt the need of having clinical trials for approval of any drug, to have a scientific procedure for bringing the drug into the market. And for that, even if we needed experiments which needed to be conducted on the human beings, then it should be done in a proper manner. So, like I said, the historical background of the clinical trials is because of this. Now, you can see here that one more point which I missed is that even when the vulnerable groups, people were being subjected to such unethical experiments, there was no data which was collected, and there was no statistics which was laid down to scientifically validate that yes, that this drug is effective on so many people, even though they were slaves. So there was no existence of statistical significant data. Now we know that in these days, today, any research which is to be, or any drug which is to be brought out, has to be backed up by some statistical proof. It has to be backed up by statistical significant data. But earlier it was not there. So now let us see what is Nuremberg Code. This is also very interesting. Now, Nuremberg Code, it actually constitutes one of the earliest guidelines which were laid down for performing the experiments on human beings. As I said, in earlier days, like in the 18th, 19th century, especially during the World War II, the scientists and doctors under the Hitler Nazi rule, they performed a lot of unethical experiments. Now, when a hue and cry was made by the society, then it was said that these doctors or the researchers which have performed unethical experiments on poor, slaves and all, they should be questioned. They should be made to answer why they did such cruel experiments. And hence there was a doctor's trial, for which the doctors and researchers were caught and questioned by the court of law for the cruelties that they performed. Now this further, came out with many countries, which especially the Europe and North America, which took a lead, and they said that we have to lay down some principles. So a document of 10 principles was laid down, which is then called Nuremberg Code, which was the starting of the clinical trials. And this Nuremberg Code was then made into the Declaration. Since it was in Geneva, it is known as the Declaration of Geneva. And in 1948, it was laid down, and the principles of ethics in clinical trial performance were laid down in these declaration. Now, after that, 1948, in 1964, there was another declaration that was laid down in Finland. That is known as Declaration of Helsinki, because it was laid down in Helsinki. And the World Medical Association, that is doctors, medical practitioners, researchers from basically the developed countries like Europe and America, they joined hands and they further kind of worked on that first draft, and the second draft which came out was in 1964, which was known as the Declaration of Helsinki. Now this declaration is a set of ethical do's and don'ts. It lays down that you have to perform the experiments on any human beings ethically, and how it should be done and what should not be done is all laid down in this declaration. So any experiment performed by any doctor or any scientist has to be followed in this manner, and that principles or that procedure is laid down in the second Declaration of Helsinki. Now, this declaration basically wants that the subjects, as I said, the human beings on whom the trial or the clinical drug trial is being done, they should be fully aware of the effects which are going to come in their body with any injection or any drug which they consume. So it says that the subject should be fully informed of all the positive and negative aspects of the trial, and they should be ready to give consent to you, to the doctors, to the researchers, to be a participant or to be a volunteer in the scientific study. So any human being or anybody can volunteer, you, I, anybody can volunteer for any research study. And obviously, the researcher who is performing the study on any human being, it is his moral duty to make the person aware that, see, this is what is going to happen in your body, and these are the positive effects which you can experience, and these are the negative which may come or which may go or which may not go. Whatever the case is, the volunteer, whosoever volunteers for the study, should be fully informed of all the positive and negative effects. Next, now in the recent past also, we have seen that researchers were conducting clinical trials without telling people. Like they were giving some medication to the people who were approaching them, and patients who were involved in the study were not being told about the various aspects of the study, like various negative effects, especially of the study. So we can say that they were intentionally, the researchers were hiding many aspects of the scientific study which they were doing on the. Hence, there was a need which was felt that a proper procedure should be again done. So today, now in the 21st century, if any new drug has to be approved or has to come out in the market, it has to be first approved for human use only after complying with certain standards or procedures or formalities as part of testing of the drug on human beings. So we can say that now we have a very strict procedure wherein clinical trials come in, and there's a proper team, there's a proper laid down procedure, a dedicated lab, dedicated workers, and a research team who looks after all these aspects. There's SOPs are there for performing any clinical trial or study. So now let's us see that what is a clinical trial. Clinical trial, as we see here, is a clinical study which is conducted in human subjects aimed to discover or verify the clinical effect or use of a drug. And the drug can be a new drug or it can be even an existing one. It ensures that the drug or the medicine or the treatment or any other equipment, we can say, or any implant, it should be safe and effective, and it should be given in appropriate doses, and there should be a proper regime that does not cause any ill effects in any of the patients. Now, testing of the drugs in human beings is essential, as tests on animals cannot adequately ensure the effectiveness and safety for human use. Like as I said, humans studies were done on humans, but before doing any study on the humans, it was also subjected, the drug was also experimented on animals. But any drug which is experimented on any of the animals, it is not necessary that if it does not produce any ill effects on the animal, it is not necessary that it will not produce any ill effect on humans also. Why? We will see. Because a human being metabolizes and he responds to a drug in a different manner than animals. Animals have a different metabolic system, and there are also variations which exist between patients and normal human beings. In different ethnic groups, a person belonging to North America, Europe, India, they are of different ethnicities. So there are variations in how our body would respond to any particular procedure or a drug. So it is important that any drug which is tested should be tested in that particular ethnic group wherein it is being brought out, and also it is important to study the process of absorption, distribution and dispersion of the drug in human body. Now, during the clinical study or the trial, some adverse or toxic effects also arise. Such adverse or toxic effects should be always documented or noted, and they should first be identified also, so that it is important that the clinical trial or the clinical study which is going on should document all these effects, whatever they are, whether they are adverse or toxic. It is not right that we hide these effects which are brought out, because if we want to just show the positive aspects and we do not show the negative aspects, then once the drug comes into the market and masses consume it, then we're going to have a lot of trouble. Now, as we know that all the drugs are absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted from the body. So, the ADME, as we say, that the entire process of ADME, that is absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of the drug, should be thoroughly studied during the clinical trial. Any new drug or product which is studied, which is under study, which is being experimented on human beings, it should ascertain the safety as well as efficacy. Like, the drug should be safe for consumption and it should be efficient. It should be able to perform the role for which it is designated. That is also very important. And any new drug which is to be approved should have a new use, or it should have some advantage over the existing drugs. Obviously, if there is already a drug available for any ailment, a headache or any other problem, and you still want to research or you still want to do the clinical trial of another compound or another chemical, then you should be able to justify why you are doing, because that drug is already available. The researcher should ensure that the drug which he is trying, or the clinical trial, which is an elaborate process which he is doing, should be able to treat some new disease, like maybe a treatment for a new cancer, or a disease like autoimmune disease for which the drug is not yet available. Such researchers should be promoted. Now, before testing the drug on human beings, it is to be subjected to various laboratory studies and also tests on humans. And every clinical research is to be preceded by careful assessment of inherent risks in comparison to the foreseeable benefits. What does this mean? That yes, we know that this drug is going to bring about this benefit, but we should also first of all be careful in assessing what are the risks involved if we subject the human beings to this particular drug. Now, there is a term called investigational drug. What is this investigational drug? Let us try to find out. An investigational drug is one in which is actually not yet approved by the licensing authority. As you can see that the name itself suggests that it is under investigation. So it is called investigational drug, which is yet to be approved by the licensing authority, that is the Drug Control Authority of India, or the Drug Control Authority of Food and Drug Administration, which we call in short as FDA. It can be a pharmaceutical form or any active ingredient which is under investigation for study. If an existing drug formulation or package is studied for its use in another form, that will be also an investigational drug. That is, for example, if the drug is already approved earlier for, say, the purpose of injection, but now we are testing it in use as a oral capsule or as a oral tablet, then also that particular drug will be called an investigational drug. Similarly, if there is an approved drug which is tested for a new indication other than the one which is already existing. For example, there was a drug which was earlier being used for hypertension or high BP, but now we want to find out whether the same drug is also useful in promoting hair growth. So again, we will have to experiment this particular drug for this purpose, that is hair growth. So in that case also, this existing drug will become investigational drug. All right. So two examples I have given. What is an investigational drug? In both cases, for a new product or for a new use, in the sense from an injectable to oral or from existing use to a new use. In both cases, that drug will become investigational drug and it will be subjected to proper research, clinical trial methods and SOPs. Now, there's another term called informed consent, which is involved in clinical trial. When we study the subject of clinical trial, we are studying all these terms. What is informed consent? Now, you can also understand from the name itself that informed consent is a process by which a subject under study voluntarily confirms his or her willingness. As I said, any researcher, any medical practitioner, if he is undertaking any research or he's bringing out any new drug into the market, he has to do the clinical trials. Also, he has to first obtain consent from the people who are volunteering to be subjects. So, what is an informed consent? Informed consent is a process by which any volunteer or any subject under study voluntarily confirms that yes, I am willing to participate in this research. I am willing to be a subject or a volunteer in this particular clinical trial. But then he has to be informed of all aspects of the trial, that is, all the positive and negative aspects. Informed consent should be obtained from the volunteer or the subject, like the person on whom we are going to do the research or we are going to study. That person should sign a document saying that yes, I am informed of all the positive and the negative aspects and I give my consent to be a volunteer for this particular research study. So, there should not be any involvement of any force. Any researcher who is doing the study should not forcibly force anybody to be a party to that research. There should not be any involvement of any fraud, any deceit, or any compulsion for getting the consent form signed by the volunteer for the research trial. Informed consent is a document which means that the consent from the volunteer should be signed and it should be properly written in a documenting manner. It is the duty of the researcher or the medical practitioner that or the trial team that they disclose all the risks and the hazards of using the new drug or the investigational product on that subject. And each one of us, each person has the right to decide whether the body should be permitted to medical hazards or risks, and it is our free will that we either agree or we disagree. Even if we give the informed consent and in the middle we feel that no, our body cannot bear it, we have the right to say that we do not want to be the part of the study anymore. So now let us see why the clinical trials are conducted. We have seen the importance, we have seen the history, we have seen some terms which are associated with the clinical trials, and we now see why they are conducted. We will be able to understand it. The clinical trials are essential to find out whether the new drug will be useful and safe for use in human beings. Also, clinical trials give information regarding the use, effectiveness, dosage regime, and side effects which may be harmful or beneficial to human beings. Now, during the preclinical studies, there will be certain predictions regarding the use and the properties of the new agent or product. So, clinical trials will help in confirming these predictions that yes, whatever the drug is destined to be used for, that is right. It is confirmation of the our assumptions, and also clinical trials help in establishing the pharmacological properties of the drug, which includes pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic aspects in human beings. Even the toxicological properties of the drugs in humans are established through clinical trials. And clinical trials represent a scientific method to test individual drugs and the procedures of their use in human beings. They help to discover better ways to prevent, detect, and treat disease and illnesses. And as per the Schedule Y of the Drugs and Cosmetics Acts and Rules, clinical trials are required to be carried out in India before a new drug is approved for marketing. Now let us quickly look into the various phases of clinical trials. Clinical trials are generally categorized in 4 phases. What are these 4 phases? The first 3 phases, as we see, they are before the drug is approved. Right? Before the drug is approved, these phases are conducted, and after the drug is approved and after it is marketing, the 4th phase comes into the picture, that is called post-marketing surveillance. So the first 3 phases of clinical trials are phase 1, which is on human clinical pharmacology trial, exploratory phase, which is the phase 2, confirmatory trial, which is phase 3, and post-marketing surveillance, which is phase 4. In phase 1, which is the human clinical pharmacology trial, it is the first phase or first trial in any human subject or for any drug or any substance. It is carried out in 2 to 10 subjects or volunteers, and the maximum tolerated dose is calculated here. Also, as I said, pharmacodynamic and pharmacokinetic behavior of the drug is observed here. Any adverse reactions, if any, for the related compound is also tested and evaluated here. Its intensity is also studied here. And these studies are often carried out in healthy young volunteers using clinical, physiological, and biochemical observations. In the phase 2, which is the exploratory trial, 10 to 20 patients are studied at each dose level, and possible therapeutic uses, effective dose range, and pharmacokinetics of the drug are also studied and evaluated here. And the minimum therapeutic dose, frequency, and the dose regime is also studied here. Optimal dose for effectively treating any disease is calculated and used for further trial phases. Efficacy and safety of the drug is also studied in this phase, phase 2, that is the exploratory trial phase. In the phase 3, which is the confirmatory trial phase, it is carried out on hundreds of patients which are distributed over many centers, from different geography. And the purpose of these trials is to obtain sufficient evidence about the efficacy and safety of the drug in large number of patients. In the 4th phase, which is after we obtain the license of the drug, post-marketing surveillance, in this phase, these are performed after obtaining the approval from the licensing authority and after marketing of the pharmaceutical product. These trials in the phase 4 are normally in the form of post-marketing surveillance, assessment of therapeutic value, treatment of strategies, and use and safety profile. If not found safe, the product has to be removed from the market. So this was about the historical background and different phases of clinical trials, and we also learned about some of the terms which are associated with clinical trials. I thank all the viewers, and we will meet again, and I encourage you to study the course 3, which is MV003 of PGTPSM program. Thank you very much.
Do you wish to be part of a television studio like this or any other media system? Or already part of any media system, want to enhance a new set of skills? Welcome to School of Journalism.